Bienvenue to Bonjour Paris Live. Our online event series, free for Bonjour Paris members, offers expert lectures, discovery talks, and conversations about la vie française. In between your trips to France, we're here to inspire you. Bonjour Paris has been online since 1995, almost as old as the internet itself. Our website is packed with interesting articles about the culture and history of Paris. And now, thanks to the support of our growing membership base, we're able to showcase new offerings like video and online talks. For details about all the benefits of Bonjour Paris membership, visit our membership page on our website. Enjoy today's presentation and à bientôt!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bonjour Paris Live. I'm Poppy Pearce, digital content and social media producer for France Media, and I'm incredibly excited to be your host today, as journalist Jeffrey Iverson joins us for part one of a two-part virtual tour of Rue Montorgueil and the Quartier Émile Zola, dubbed the Belly of Paris. Once an artery leading to the Great Les Halles food market, this lively pedestrian market street has never lost its gastronomic character. In part one today, we will visit the historic landmarks and restaurants that help recount the neighbourhood's delicious history all the way back to the Middle Ages. Also to mention, our 2026 calendar is now on sale, so don't forget to purchase yours. Now, let's dive in to the main event. So, Jeffrey T. Iverson is a graduate of NYU's Institute of French Studies and School of Journalism, and has called Paris his home since the year 2000. His stories of maverick chefs, enlightened winemakers, prolific artists have notably appeared in France Today, Time, Centurion, and Departures magazines, among others. For 7 years, Jeffrey has profiled the streets of Paris for France Today magazine, a sister publication for Bonjour Paris. And France Media have compiled a selection of 28 of Jeffrey's best into a special edition called Discover Paris, a collection of the streets that define contemporary Paris, with photographs and interviews filled with colour and characters, all of which can be found online. Now, that's enough from me, and I will now hand it over to you, Jeffrey.
Thanks so much, Poppy, and bonjour, everyone. It really is a treat for me to join all of you today to explore really one of the most delicious streets in Paris, I think. Let's get started. So the story kind of starts for me, in 1969, when this traumatic event happened in Paris. And when, for logistical and for sanitary reasons, politicians forced the merchants of the Les Halles food market to leave the city for the suburbs. It was as if the gastronomic heart of the city had been cut out, but that heart had arteries, and among them was Rue Montorgueil. What's remarkable is that this artery is still alive today and continuing a history that began all the way back in the Middle Ages. And I think it's the best way to really savor Rue Montorgueil is to start by, as we're doing today, revisiting its past. To better understand how, in a city that's always changing, it seems like Rue Montorgueil has always been one of the great foodie destinations of the French capital. So today in part one, we'll visit some of the landmarks and gastronomic institutions of Montorgueil and Les Halles to get a sense of the depth of history in this part of Paris. And then in part two, 2 weeks from now, we'll visit the shops and restaurants that are keeping this gastronomic tradition alive and taste what they have to offer. Looking back through history, perhaps no one ever expressed what this street is really all about better than Honoré de Balzac, France's father of literary realism. Balzac spent a lifetime walking the streets of Paris, drawing inspiration from the cobblestones and the human spectacles that he saw playing out in street markets and in cafes. And like all lovers of Paris, Balzac was sometimes frustrated by how rapidly the city can evolve and how your favorite bistro or an entire street can become unrecognizable overnight. He knew how it feels to wander the city, searching for that single street, that single restaurant, that single meal that which might allow you to taste the essence of Paris again. And in 1843, he described how delicious it feels when you finally do that in his novel Honorine, which was part of the sprawling masterpiece La Comédie Humaine, the human comedy. He wrote, "Oh, to find Paris again. Do you know what that means, dear Parisians? It is to find the cuisine of Rocher de Cancale, as prepared by Borel for gourmets so lucky to appreciate it, for it only exists on Rue Montorgueil." Now, Au Rocher de Cancale is the name of a very real restaurant that happened, that opened around 1795 on Rue Montorgueil. And as we know from his proudly prominent belly that was immortalized by Rodin, Balzac took his food very seriously. So Rocher de Cancale must have had some pretty transcendent cuisine. We can only guess what a dish it was that was so encapsulated Paris for Balzac. Was it a simple dish that Balzac loved, like ham with spinach, or something more complex, like a vol au vent pastry with cream? Or perhaps it was the sole normande, the Normandy sole, which this iconic fish recipe that is said to have been invented at the Rocher de Cancale in 1837. Or perhaps it was just their famous oysters, the freshest in Paris, they said, delivered straight from Cancale in Normandy to the saltwater basins that had been built just down the street from here on Rue Montorgueil. Balzac was known to eat 100 oysters in a single sitting. Whatever it was for Balzac, there are dishes to satisfy everyone on Rue Montorgueil. In 1831, a young piano virtuoso named Frédéric Chopin, who had just moved into a little apartment north of here on Boulevard Poissonnière, wrote to a friend, "Paris is the most beautiful of worlds. It answers your every desire." You could say the same thing about Rue Montorgueil. For generations of gourmets, bon vivants, and connoisseurs of colorful characters, Rue Montorgueil has been one of these rare avenues where your appetite is always met. And that's still the case today. That was certainly the conclusion that I've come to since having researched this neighborhood a number of times through the years for different publications like France Today, and also for Time magazine. But let's get started from the beginning and also get ourselves situated. Rue Montorgueil is located on the right bank of Paris. So it's north of Notre Dame and Ile de la Cité. It's northeast of the Louvre and northwest of the Pompidou. It runs like this, making a V with its sister street, Rue Montmartre. At the bottom of the V, you find the Église Saint-Eustache, the Saint-Eustache Cathedral. It's surrounded by metro stations, but perhaps the most convenient one is the Sentier metro stop to the north on Rue Réaumur. From there, when you step out of the metro and walk over to the street, you can look down the full length of Rue Montorgueil past this trellis gate entryway. And if you walk down just a bit and then turn around, you'll notice that the street runs up a slight hill. And apparently that incline is not due solely to a natural geological formation, but harkens back to the Middle Ages when Paris was a walled city. Around 1190, Philip Augustus ordered the building of a new wall around the city to protect it from the threat of English attacks. And it was the first of a number of successively larger walls to be built around the city. The placement of the Philip Augustus wall is the first black line here. Here are Rue Montorgueil and Montmartre, only partially in the city at this point when the Philip Augustus wall went up. You can actually see a vestige of the wall quite nearby, just a few steps from Rue Montorgueil, behind the 15th century tower called the Tour Jean Sans Peur, which was actually built up right against the wall. I definitely encourage you to visit it. It's a rare vestige of medieval Paris with some beautiful stone decor inside. So apparently medieval Parisians got into this habit of dumping their garbage and other detritus over the ramparts right about at the site of the future Rue Montorgueil. And then when another wall was built in the 14th century by Charles V, farther north here, that tradition continued, eventually resulting in a hill of waste and debris that became mockingly known in Latin as Mont Superbus, which is literally Mount Pride, or in French, Mont Torgueil. It was especially convenient to have a nearby dumping ground since Philip Augustus's predecessor, Louis VI, had just moved the city's food market from the Ile de la Cité over onto these former marshlands in 1137. And this, of course, is the future layout. Philip Augustus's new walls, as you can see, would now incorporate the market within the city limits. And he took a real interest in organizing the market himself and had the first wooden market halls built and basically set in motion this transformation of the market into a large, prosperous trading center, which every king would kind of try to leave their thumbprint on and enlarge in some way. I'll show you the area of Lyon on a map from the 1550s. So on this map, north is on the left side of the screen. You can see down here the V of Rue Montorgueil and Rue Montmartre. This is the V there. And so here you see the name Rue Montorgueil, and just next to it, it says you also have the name Rue Comte d'Artois, which was another name used for the street in this era. And by this time, the market of Léal, which is at the tip of the V there, had become one of the most animated places in Paris. Here's a closer look. So the main square, or carreau, was rebuilt by Henry III in the 1550s, and it was lined with these houses where merchants were sheltered by shopping arcades. You can see this line of pillars here just above the cross there. Here we have the the Hall au Blé, or the wheat market. And then you see where all the different merchants ostensibly set up their trade. You have the meat vendors of La Boucherie de Beauvais. You have the cheesemongers of Rue de la Fromagerie. In the middle of the square here, you have this something called Le Pilori, which is which for centuries would be the place where criminals would be put in stocks and displayed for passersby to ridicule. And then down here, you have the Saint Eustache Cathedral, which by this time is rising up over the square, having begun construction in 1532. It took the place of a small chapel that was created here in 1213, which was funded by this wealthy merchant as thanks to King Philip Auguste for granting him the right to collect a tax on the sale of fish baskets. And so this would grow into the parish church and become the Cathedral of Saint Eustache. You see the influence of Zola in works like Le Caveau des Halles, created in 1880 by this realist painter Victor Gabriel Gilbert. This is just 4 years after the Ballet of Paris was published. It was in the mid-19th century that really the modern era arrived for Les Halles, because this was when the questionable at best sanitary conditions created by this congestion of people and food and Ancien Regime buildings was finally tackled by the government through the creation of this unified network of covered markets. Napoleon III called on the architect Victor Baltard to come up with this great modern, entirely metal structure deployed in vast umbrellas that was inspired by the contemporary architecture of railway stations. And from 1854 to 1870, 10 new pavilions in iron and glass were created, which were really, for the era, technical marvels, which improved hygiene and ventilation and natural lighting. It made Les Halles only all the more fascinating for artists as this place now where which symbolized, modern commerce, but also was a place where you had this intermingling of people from all different classes, a place where the world of rural farming and all the provinces of France met, the booming metropolis of Paris. And many of the famous addresses we associated with the heyday of Les Halles do date back to this period at the turn of the 20th century. Take, for example, the oldest rotisserie in Paris, Louchebem. When Louchebem was founded at 31 Rue Berger, the pavilions of Baltard were towering, just meters away, directly in front of the building. It was created in 1878, and the name Louchebem refers to the dialect that the butchers of Les Halles created for themselves, which was a kind of a pig Latin, which allowed them to communicate amongst each other without the customers understanding them. Here's some examples of the Louchebem language, and these are these pictures of this world that fascinated notably the great photographer Robert Doisneau, who took many pictures of the butchers of Les Halles. So you'd have, chefs coming from all across Paris to Lille to buy their meat for their restaurants. And naturally, you'd have many other shops which were created to tempt them to come, buy their cutlery or their utensils, their ceramics, their copper cookware. Shops like Delerin, which was located just a few steps away from Saint-Eustache Cathedral. It was founded in the 1880s and is situated in this really atmospheric shop that itself dates back to 1820. Leal was, at this time, a world that never slept. Chefs would come here to buy their meat and their fish and their produce before sunrise, and then they'd come back after their shift, because this is the only place in Paris where you could get a meal, when the other restaurants closed. They have these 24-hour restaurants like Chez Denise, which is a restaurant we'll definitely be visiting in part 2 of this talk. Of course, another example, and perhaps the most legendary 24-hour restaurant of Leal is the Pied de Cochon, au Pied de Cochon. By the time my mom was a young woman visiting Paris for the first time in the 1960s, a trip to Leal at 6 a.m. to get a cup of hot of French onion soup was like as essential as going to see the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre. And that is, an experience I can only envy, and I do envy my mom for having experienced that. It's for having, gotten a chance to see this world that Life magazine captured in 1960. They were capturing a last glimpse of a place that was soon to disappear. Because in 20th century Paris, Baltard's Leal proved inadequate for this ever increasing traffic and clientele. And in 1959, after these long debates, it was decreed that the Leal food market would be transferred to the suburbs. And so it was in 1969 that this traumatic event took place in the neighborhood, which was all the merchants leaving the Leal. And it's funny, if you go into the Saint-Eustache Cathedral, you'll actually find this diorama of which portrays almost like a biblical event, like Moses traversing the desert, of all the merchants from Leal leaving. There were, public protests calling for at least the pavilions to be left in place, but in 1971 they were demolished, leaving this gaping hole behind. Today, only images, remain of the Leal food market. Images like this mosaic that covers the wall of the bistro Cochon à l'oreille on Rue Montmartre. But in this bistro, there's something else that you'll notice on the wall besides the mosaics, something less nostalgic and more hopeful. It's just these few words near the ceiling, and it says, "Le ventre de Paris a pu émigrer, son cœur reste au Havre." The belly of Paris may have departed, but its heart remains in Leal. It's a moving sentiment. And when we meet again in 2 weeks for part 2, we'll find out if it's true. when we head back to Rue Montorgueil and Leal to see what that hole I think got filled up with, and also to meet the shopkeepers and the restaurateurs who are keeping the spirit of this neighborhood alive today. And hopefully we'll taste a few good things along the way. Thank you guys.
That was brilliant. That was so, so interesting. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm sure everyone else loved that as much as I did too. We'll open the floor for some questions. So to the people watching this, if you see that Q&A button and you have any questions, feel free to ask them now and we'll answer them. I mean, I've got a few that I might start with whilst people are typing theirs. My first one was going to ask the question of that quote, "The belly of Paris may have departed, but the heart remains in Leal," whether that's still true, but I guess you're going to leave us on a cliffhanger with that one and we'll have to find out in part 2. But I loved Zola's description of the cheeses. So if he was to visit Rue Montorgueil today, do you think he would be surprised? What do you think would surprise him the most?
I think it's the same story that's just told over and over again. You know, the story of Leal. Paris has always been like, where do the it's not necessarily rich and poor, but there is, gentrification happens over and over again, and goes from neighborhood to neighborhood, and there is there's been a wave of gentrification that has, in some respects, really saved this street. There's it was in bad shape, just like the Sentier neighborhood just to the north of here, and there was people started moving in and buying up the apartments. A younger generation of yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it become a place that is not a place where a lot of poor people, I don't think, live anymore. The real estate prices have gone up, and I'm sure Zola would kind of be pissed about that.
Absolutely.
He'd also be very hungry and eating everything they can find on that, for sure.
We have a great question from Jacqueline, who asks, is it possible to visit the suburban Leal, and does it have its own charm?
Rungis. The suburban Leal is called Rungis, and you can visit it, and it's fascinating. It's enormous. There's it's a whole city. It's basically a whole covered city with its own bistros and stuff inside. That's probably the coolest thing is if you go there, you can go eat in these places, which it has its own kind of like 24-hour bistros and stuff that are there for all the chefs and stuff who go out there and have meetings, with their suppliers and sit down and have drinks. It's a place that you have like boutiques that are kind of for the professionals, but they're highlighting the wines, wine importers and foie gras importers and Italian fine food importers have their own boutiques that they're to entice chefs and stuff to come in. So yeah, it's definitely, you can visit it, and it's worth visiting.
Brilliant. I loved what you said about your mum having the 6 a.m. French onion soup from a pied de croissant. What are other unique and essential experiences like that just sum up the essence of the area?
Well, a lot of those experiences I'll be talking about on the next part, because it's really about what you can experience today that really captures that essence. But I would say, there's places that chefs still go today. Like I mentioned, the cookware shops. There's places where pastry chefs go, like Jade de Toul, which is this amazing shop which has all these amazing ingredients for pastry chefs, and has just this gorgeous selection of fine foods from all across France. And then, eating in a place like Escargot de Montorgueil, which I mentioned at the end with its mosaics on the wall. These are just like stunningly beautiful settings, with like with the decors are intact, and it's like being on a movie set when you go on these, but it's real, and so there's a lot of places to go there to really get a sense of that encapsulate all the history and the magic of this neighborhood.
Amazing. And Michael has asked, he said, will part 2 include Rue des Petits Carreaux? And he also said, thank you for a wonderful overview of this fascinating area.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for that. And so Rue des Petits Carreaux is I'm treating it kind of as part of Rue Montorgueil. It's what you call the first, if I'm not mistaken, it's the top of the street, starting at the where you have the lattice archway. That's Rue des Petits Carreaux, and then it becomes Rue Montorgueil. So yeah, well, we'll be talking about the whole street.
Well, that makes me very excited for part 2. And I hope you all enjoyed part 1 as much as I did. And we will draw the question and answer. If anyone's got their final burning question, put it in because I could still see them. But that was amazing, Jeffrey. Thank you very much. And you can keep posted with what Jeffrey is up to over on his Instagram. His handle is Jeffrey T. Iverson. And yes, we are spoiled as we have part 2 of this fascinating talk with Jeffrey coming up on November the 2nd and hosted by the wonderful Sylvia. So register for that on the bonjourparis.com website. And there will also be the link sent in an upcoming newsletter with the full recording of this event to watch back at your leisure. So until then, from all of us at Bonjour Paris, merci et à très bientôt. Thank you very much.
À bientôt.